What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy, back with Hometown Commander. We are back moving through our series of top 10 cards of 2022. We are back for top 10 non-creature artifacts or artifacts printed in 2022. We're omitting all reprints, new artifacts only. I mean, there's a lot of really cool artifacts that came out this year. Looking back through 2022, I realized that a lot of these artifacts changed. Some of them changed the way I brewed. Some of them were really fun to play with, and some of them I have yet to still play with, but I hope to play with in the future. And so we are going to get right into it. Number 10, we have Portal to Phyrexia from the Brothers War, a mythic and a pretty cool mythic at that. 9 mana whenever it enters the battlefield. Each opponent sacks 3 creatures. Beginning your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. Man, it seems like a really good artifact to cheat out if you can, but if you can, it is going to end up netting you a ton of value in getting your opponent's things or reanimating your creatures back to the battlefield under your control. I'm going to highlight out that anyone's casting Portal to Phyrexia for a hard 9 mana in any of the decks they're playing it in, with so many of the creatures that reduce your artifacts by 1, or so many ways to cheat this bad boy in. I think this is going to be one of those fun cards in Commander that goes alongside those Darksteel Forges and those Mycosynth Lattices up in the top end of an artifact deck, where you're cheating this in, you're getting it in for cheap, and you're just mining the value. I've yet to find a deck for Portal Phyrexia, but I think it'll happen, and I think this card will continue to see more play over the next year and justify that $20 price tag. At number 9, we have Scepter of Eternal Gore. We're going to notice a couple 40k artifacts on this list, and that's because I think some of them did such a good job at getting us what we needed in certain cases. I really like Scepter of Eternal Glory. It's a 4 mana mana rock, which just for the 1 mana of any color is a little bit too expensive, sure, but I think where Scepter of Eternal Glory really shines is its second ability. It says you can add 3 mana of any 1 color. I find only if you control 3 or more lands with the same name. In any monocolor deck, you're going to always be able to tap this for 3 mana, but I think on a lot of even 2-color decks, you're probably going to be able to tap this for 3 mana, depending on how many lands of different types that you play. I think this is one of those cards that's going to be a big help for obviously the mono black decks, right? This came in the Necron precon and it was in there for a reason. I think this could go pretty far in a blue or white deck as well, and just pushing mana forward. I've yet to put this in a deck yet, but I think it will go into a deck eventually, and I think this one finds a good slot. Number 8. Thunderhawk Gunship, probably one of my favorite vehicles I've seen in a really long time, and I was really happy that Warhammer brought us some new vehicles, because if you don't know anything about the game, there's a lot of tanks and planes and different things they are used in different armies for transports. So here we see a Thunderhawk Gunship vehicle flying. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 white Astartes warrior creature tokens with vigilance. So one of them is enough to crew it. It has crew 2. And that says whenever it attacks, attacking creatures you control gain flying until end of turn. And that's where this card is really, really good. You crew it, you attack with it, all of the attacking creatures you control get flying. That turns any of these decks that you're playing this card in to be immediately better, because you're pushing all of your creatures and getting them immediately in the air, which makes all of your attacks for your opponents worse. I love this in those go wide decks where you're always going to have enough tokens to crew this thing up and get it moving, and it's just going to make all of your attacks way more lethal. Of course, this was in the Esper Space Marines, Amish Marines Precon, which makes a ton of sense. That was a token deck that wanted to go wide and utilize it that way. But I can see this going into a lot of things, and this was one of the reasons that I finally put it on my list to make an Esper's Vehicles deck, and that is coming. Keep your eyes peeled for that. Number 7, we have the Golden Throne, another 40k enchantment, legendary artifact, showing the Emperor, the Emperor man himself there. Arcane Life Support, if you would lose the game, instead exile this and your life total becomes 1. That seems pretty cool as a little bit of a mini effect. In some cases, I feel like that could be pretty important, but I think the more important part is the second part. 1,000 Souls, die every day, tap, sack a creature, add 3 mana in any combination of colors. Now, you can only do this once, right, because it taps to do that. I still think it's important, though, and I think it's an added piece in some of these artifact creature decks where you can get this down for either 1 or nothing with all of your artifact reduction, but you can use that once per turn to get some particular mana that you need. I think the Golden Throne will see some play. I'm not sure if it's going to see a lot of play. Of course, I don't know anything like that for sure, right? The 40k precons have only been out for a few months. We haven't truly seen where these go, but I'd like to use the Golden Throne in something, and I'm still trying to find that list, whatever it may be. At number 6, we have one of the cards that caused probably one of the most controversies when it was first seen this year. And that's a Bootleggers Stash from Streets of New Capenna at number 6. Bootleggers Stash is a really fun artifact in a lot of ways because it enables sacrifice decks to get extra value out of their lands, tapping their lands to create treasures, then sacrificing those treasures for the mana they were going to get out of their lands anyway, but proccing any of those effects that they get that activate on sacrifice, or the commander that takes the most advantage of this card just makes Corvold even more destructive in its ability, because it literally just accelerates the deck more than it was before. Bootlegger Stash is on this list because I think it also works really well in a deck like Chatterfang, or a lot of those black-green sacrifice decks or aristocrats decks that can take advantage of not only sacrificing the creatures, but using cards like Nadier's Nightblade or Marionette Master to also sacrifice artifacts. So I think Bootlegger Stash fits really well in there. Bootlegger Stash is on my list of cards to use. I am still trying to avoid ever putting together a Corvold list again, because as much as I love the look of Corvold, I know that the reputation that Corvold has, I'm trying to work on a just black-green sacrifice list, and I'm trying to avoid Chatterfang, but I am excited to see what Bootlegger Stash can do when you put it in a list like that. And the best part of Bootlegger Stash is it is in green, so you don't have to put it in a black-green or a Jund sacrifice deck. This can go in even your landfall decks if you can take advantage of it somehow. Kind of interesting, but I love it, and has one of my favorite borderless arts of the year. Number 5, Horn of Valhalla. I have a lot to say about Horn of Valhalla. First off, because I think the existence of another X white create X tokens sorceries is very important. Your green-white tokens decks are going to rely on this and creating a ton of mana to just flood the board out wide, and I really like the fact that we get that as an adventure. But then I like that this comes down as an equipment, equips for 3, and buffs a creature for each creature you control. I like this because it kind of gives you the best bits of both sides. At minimum, it's another X white create token spell in your deck, and that's pretty important on its own. And if you have the extra mana, you can get it down and pump a creature into your control to make it even bigger. I really tried hard to get this in my Jetmare list, and it's gone in once or twice, and it's come out once or twice. I really like the card. I just found other sorcery and instant speed token production instead, but I still really like Horn of Valhalla, and it'll find its list. I'm more than sure it will. At number 4, we have Monster Manual, again from Commander Legends 2 Electric Boogaloo. We have a green artifact that when it comes down, you can pay 1 and a green and tap it and put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. It's never a bad idea to cheat creatures into play, especially very large ones. And I think Monster Manual does a really good job for the big creatures decks that want any way to cheat some big things in, especially at instant speed. The cool part about Monster Manual is that, remember, that ability does tap at instant speed, so on your opponent's turns you can put a creature down and have it have its summoning sickness gone by the time it gets back to your turn to use it. And I think that's probably where Monster Manual probably gets the most of its utility, is flashing something in on somebody else's turn by putting it down, blocking with it, or at minimum untapping with it without the summoning sickness to make your attacks and get better. And I do like that about Monster Manual. Number 3, we have Relic of Legends. Relic of Legends is pretty niche compared to a lot of the other artifacts we've seen on this list, but I think of the right decks, Relic of Legends has a lot of upside. Tap for any 1 mana of 1 color, and then tap an untapped legendary creature you control to add a mana of any 1 color. I think what makes Relic of Legends even better is, unlike Catilda, which gives the ability to tap for a mana to all of your humans, Relic of Legend allows you to tap that legendary creature with this card's ability to add the Mana of Color, which can get around Summoning Sickness. And I think that's the best part about Relic of Legends. It's what makes this probably really good in those new Dahada lists that people have been making, or Jodo the Unifier, which is probably going to use this to a lot of good success. I have a Jodo the Unifier deck that I've been messing around with for a little bit, and a Relic of Legends almost always ends up with just accelerating your mana and getting you a lot more value than you'd expect otherwise by tapping those things that you cascade for, or getting yourself towards putting down more and more creatures and getting your board wider and wider. So I really like Relic of Legends. I don't know how it's going to go in the future, if it's going to be as hyped as it is right now, but I'm happy to see a 3-mana rock get this much hype in a world where people only want to look at 2-mana rocks. And so I'm very excited about Relic of Legends. Number 2, we have a card that's probably going to catch most people off guard, and that's Scepter of Celebration. One of my favorite decks I brewed this year was Jetmir Nexus of Rebels. I absolutely love that deck, the Great Catsby, and it's been one of the decks that I've enjoyed playing the most this year. And this card is a card I always am welcome to see when I play, because I love enchantment. I love equipments that make you tokens when a creature deals damage, because it really promotes you doing what you want to do anyway, but getting a benefit from it. The reason this card works in Jetmir, without going too in depth, is that you can put this on anything. Anything can deal the damage, get you the tokens, because the equipment also gives that creature trample, and then that way your board's going wide for whenever you can get your commander out, in this case Jetmir out, and use its ability. But I think this also fits really well in green-white tokens decks, because you're already going wide anyway. You put this on a big creature or something that's already in the air or taking advantage, get those 1/1s to be able to use for something else. A lot of those green-white tokens deck use those convoke cards where you can tap creatures to do different things. And so I like the Scepter Celebration. I think it does a lot of really good things. It is a little more niche maybe than the artifacts we're talking about around it, but for me, this was a slam dunk. Now, before I get to number 1, I realized very quickly, putting this list together and going through it, that I forgot about Halo Fountain. So I want to talk really quickly about Halo Fountain, just quickly, because this is a card that as well has gone into Jetmir, but it's a card that's gone into other token decks as well, because it introduced a win the game mechanic. For 5 mana, you can untap 15 tap creatures you control to win the game. And that is important in token decks, because more often than not, you're going to go wide and start attacking with them and doing a lot of good things. I really like Halo Fountain. The reason it didn't get in my top 10 list was because I have yet to see the dang thing in any of these decks that I run it in. I run it in Jetmir. I run it in my Layla tokens deck, or I did for a while. Never saw it. I never saw the card. I mean, sure, I could have tutored for it, but in a lot of the reasons, a lot of the scenarios where I would have tutored for it, I tutored for something else because it was more important. So I think Halo Fountain will end up being a card that I love a lot more. I just don't think I got the exposure to it to make it on my top 10 list. And number 1, this was a no-brainer for me, was the Reaver Cleaver. I absolutely love this card. We just talked about it, number 2, how I love equipment that make tokens or generate value when you deal damage. And the Reaver Cleaver, to me, is the perfect example of that. 2 and a red for equipment. It says equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample. And whenever this creature deals damage to a creature or planeswalker, or player or planeswalker, create that many treasure tokens. There's a reason Old Gnawbone is so well played in so many of the decks that play it, because it creates treasure tokens when you deal damage to a player. And I think the Reaver Cleaver takes that ability and puts it into decks that don't have access to Gnawbone. Now, in the decks that do have access to Gnawbone, your sacrifice decks and things like that, you're just getting a second copy of those effects. But I love that the Reaver Cleaver pushes this into decks that don't play Gnawbone or wouldn't play abilities like that. And this just helps you with that. The other thing I love about this is, depending on how big that creature is, this pairs with Aggravated Assault. This goes into those extra combat combos, and I love that we have another card that enables that. Yes, 3 mana to come down to 3 mana to equip is probably going to some people be too much for this ability, but the first time you see someone nail someone for 8 or 9 and make 8 or 9 treasures and keep going on a big combo, you're going to understand why this card is really good and why I think it deserves number 1 slot for me, for my top artifact 2022. What do you guys think? What are your top 3 or top 5 artifacts 2022? Do you agree with me? Did I miss something obvious that you think's better? I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. Toss me a like. Toss me a subscribe if you want to see the rest of the 2022 top 10s that I have coming out for the different card types and what I have to say about the cards coming from the future. I'm very excited about Phyrexia in 2023 in general, and I will catch you next time.